I woke up at 6, with the smell of rain hitting the window, and that feeling that the day would ask for more than I could give. I, Leonardo, 29, a wedding musician by choice, and a bar musician by necessity, pretended to be normal while I counted my pulse. Today, I would play at Helena and Raphael's civil wedding, in an old mansion downtown, a tiled floor, high ceiling, history seeping through the cracks. I like to work in silence, but the city decided to groan early, and every bus passed as if to remind me that I still owed bills and courage. While making coffee, my phone vibrated with an unknown number, saying, "Just this. Don't play the song she asked for." I reread the message like someone staring into a shallow abyss, knowing that the fall doesn't kill, but it teaches. She in the message was Helena, the bride with small eyes and a smile that seemed like an apology for what she hadn't even done yet. I met her at the rehearsal yesterday, and it was too fast to be safe. 2 glances crossed, and a silence that seemed to speak my name, the empty coffee cup. On the other side of the table, Alice, my sister, watched me in silence, trying to guess the storm from the shape of the clouds on my face. Alice is 24, a curiosity that cuts like a good knife, and a beautiful habit of finding a way out of a locked door. "You look like you're about to do something stupid," she said, and I replied with a half smile, because the whole truth hurts. That morning, Raphael, the groom, 33, a businessman with a firm voice and a handshake that measures who you are by the pressure you can withstand. He was polite at the rehearsals, but his eyes were always doing math, as if love were a spreadsheet, and the bride was in the liabilities column. I put on my black shirt, put away the extra strings, and tried to ignore the new weight of the phone in my pocket, as if the warning could evaporate on its own. I went outside with a premonition stuck to my soul, and every step seemed to argue with me about going or staying. Helena is 26 and has a deceptive calmness, the kind we only understand when we realize it was rehearsed for years. She speaks softly, her words touching your skin, and she apologizes, even when she's right, like someone who learned to exist without making a sound. Yesterday, during a rehearsal break, she asked me to play a slow Amapola, saying the song reminded her of her mother, who wouldn't be at the wedding. I asked why, and she looked away, like someone setting a cup on a saucer without making a sound, so as not to awaken memories. Outside, Michele, 28, the event's makeup artist and my girlfriend since I was 20, was arranging her brushes like someone ordering chaos. Michelle has eyes that see beyond, and that's why she fights with me before the trouble even arrives, as if she wants to tire out the problem in the warm-up. She loves me the right way, which sometimes hurts, because I don't always know how to be the man she deserves. When my heart decides to jump the fence, Raphael passed by us yesterday and said, punctuality is respect. And I agreed with a nod, feeling the phrase like a collar around my neck. Helena smiled at him with her mouth, but not with her eyes. And I noticed, and I think Michelle noticed too, and the world became narrow. Today's anonymous message hammered at me. Don't play the song she asked for. And I started looking for a justification, where there might only be a threat. It could be jealousy. It could be debt. It could be one of those things that the rich call family and the poor call a burden. Alice bit her lip and said it looked like blackmail, and I didn't want to give it that name so as not to give it power. I replied, "Who are you?" And another text came. Someone who doesn't want a funeral before the cake. The coffee got cold. The nerves lit up. And I understood that the day had chosen its own script. I picked up my guitar and went. The mansion was on a corner that was always windy, and the bunting of a neighboring bar seemed to test the resistance of time. The janitor opened the gate with a creak from an old telenovela and said the light had flickered twice during the night. I don't believe in omens, but I respect them, because sometimes a warning takes us by the hand away from a mistake. In the inner courtyard, Donna Carmen, 58, Raphael's mother and owner of the mansion, was checking flowers with an invisible ruler. She looked at me like someone evaluating an old piece of furniture before deciding if it belongs in the living room, and said that the civil ceremony would be at 1 o'clock sharp. The wall clock read 8:40 when I began to tune the guitar, and each note pulled at a string in my stomach. The vendors entered like hurried ants, piling up deadlines, while Michelle set up the dressing room with the precision of someone who has seen things fall apart. Alice, credentialed as my assistant, walked around without shame, asking for names, taking notes on details, sniffing out narratives like a neighborhood reporter. Helena arrived at 9:05, without exaggeration. Hair tied back low, a simple dress, that kind of beauty that doesn't need to learn tricks. When she saw us, she approached in silence and asked if I remembered the tonality from yesterday, and I did. Because some things the body records on its own. Michelle caught the tremor and placed her hand on my shoulder with a firm delicacy, reminding me that she exists. And so do I. Raphael came right after. A custom-made suit, steps that don't falter, and greeted everyone like someone stamping a document. He looked at me for more than a second, and I held his gaze, like someone holding a weight on a bench press. Not wanting to drop it, Helena veered off into the garden, and I followed to test the acoustics. And that's when she spoke. Too low for the world and loud enough for me. "Something is going to happen today," she said, and the sentence entered me like a splinter. I asked, "What?" And she shook her head, as if denying her own will, and said that sometimes we already know but prefer not to know. She asked me that if the power went out, I should keep playing. even without a microphone, because the sound of the guitar in the courtyard reminded her of a safe backyard. She also said that if someone tried to interrupt the song, Amapola, I should move on to the next one, without looking at her. It was too specific to be random, and I understood that behind the delicacy, there was an emergency plan. Michelle appeared, with a compact powder in her hand, and asked if everything was all right. And for a second, I wanted to say no, that nothing was, but I said yes, because there are times to tell the truth, and I hadn't bought the courage yet. Alice came back with some information she'd found by chance or by stubbornness. Raphael's company was being investigated for contracts with over-invoicing. I felt the news like a cold wind, the kind you can't see, but that changes the course of the smoke. Elena listened in silence and didn't seem surprised, which hurt a little, because accepting the inevitable sometimes looks like giving up. Donna Carmen called the bride for final adjustments, and her tone was that of a mother who confuses care with control. Raphael asked me to keep the repertoire within the agreed-upon list. No sentimental improvisations. And I put the phrase in a pocket with stones. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated again. If you play Amapola, someone falls. I showed it to Alice, who squeezed my arm, like someone holding a balloon so it won't fly away. She suggested talking to the event's security, but Donna Carmen had already hired everyone, and I didn't trust eyes that measured me from head to toe. The morning walked by with cat-like steps, and I realized that the mystery had sat down between us, eating slowly. At 11:20, a team came in to install extra lights, and the technician said the generator was moody, which didn't reassure me. The photographer asked for positioning tests, and I sat in the chair where I would be during the ceremony, 3 steps from Helena, and 6 from Raphael. Michelle was walking around with her makeup cart, like someone inspecting rooms before a move, and I admired the way she takes care of others. Thinking about that reminded me of my lack of courage to take care of what I felt, and I hated myself a little, because love without a backbone becomes wind. Elena called me to the piano room, an old out-of-tune instrument, and said her mother wasn't coming because of health reasons that weren't a disease. I understood that health reasons can mean fear, shame, or a mix of the two. She apologized for putting me in the middle and said that choosing the song wasn't a whim. It was a promise to someone who taught her not to give up. I asked who she was protecting, whom from, and she answered, from all of us. Raphael walked in without knocking, and the air changed shape, like when an elevator gets crowded and you hold your breath without realizing it. He said the local press might show up, and that reputations are fragile like cheap crystal, looking first at Helena and then at me. Michelle walked in behind him, and for a second, it seemed like we were on a stage with invisible marks. Alice texted me, saying she saw a man in a gray suit wandering around the garage without a badge, speaking softly on the phone. I asked her not to get close, and she replied with a cat emoji that doesn't obey. Helena played 2 notes on the out-of-tune piano and said that sometimes you keep an old instrument at home just to remember that the right sound exists. I left the room with the feeling that every step was a decision that would cost dearly. But noon arrived without asking permission. The sky cleared a little, and people started to arrange themselves in white chairs, like a lined teeth. The ceremonialist announced that everything would follow the printed script, and I received my copy, like someone accepting a map, knowing they'd rather get lost. The first song would be La Vie en Rose, then 2 instrumentals, and then Amapola. Exactly where the nerves usually scream the loudest, Michele passed by me, leaned her head on my shoulder for a second and said, "I love you," like someone giving me a life jacket before the crossing. I replied that I love you too, and hated myself again, because her love deserved a whole truth. And I was giving her change. Alice sat in the last row, phone hidden in her purse, eyes as alert as a lighthouse on a rocky coast. Donna Carmen positioned herself in the first row, with a small rosary in her closed hand, and I found it curious. Who prays to command a miracle? Raphael walked around one more time, greeting people, repeating names, securing favors, and I saw 2 identical men behind him, hired security guards. Helena appeared at the top of the courtyard stairs, simple as clear water, and for an instant, the conversation of the entire place fell silent to listen to her without sound. When she came down, I felt the weight of what I shouldn't be feeling, and looked at Michele, trying to remember where loyalty resides. The justice of the peace arranged the papers. The technician checked the microphones, and I tested a chord that felt like an omen and superstition. At the same time, the anonymous message stayed on the screen, watching me, and I hid the phone in the string case, as if I could lock up fate. A wind crossed the courtyard and turned a page of my repertoire. Landing exactly where Amapola began, I put the sheet back in place and realized my hands were trembling a little, enough to remind me that I was alive. Then it began. I played La Vie en Rose, like someone sewing a tear with a short thread, breathing between the notes to fit the world into the measure. The guitar sounded beautiful in the courtyard, because wood likes places with a past. And the past of that mansion knew how to listen. Helena was breathing slowly. Raphael kept his chin up and I moved between them, with the care of someone carrying water in a shallow dish. The first song was over. The second one too. And I opened the folder to the page that my whole body was begging me to close. Before starting Amapola, the generator coughed. The light gave a hiccup, and half the courtyard plunged into a chiaroscuro that seemed to have a purpose. Someone laughed nervously. Someone whispered that this brings bad luck, and I clung to Helena's plan. Like someone holding a track on a curve, I started to play, and on the second chord, a glass fell and broke, and the sound seemed to match the harmony in a way that angered me On the third measure, one of the security guards stood up and put a hand to his ear, like someone receiving instructions from a distance. Helena's gaze was fixed on me, like a lighthouse that dictates a route. And I followed, because obeying someone's gaze is sometimes the only way to be brave. Raphael crossed his hands behind his back, impatient and elegant. And the judge cleared his throat, trying to call time to its proper place. I kept playing, and that's when a cell phone rang too loudly. In the middle of the audience, with an old ringtone that sounded like a wall phone. The music didn't call for absolute silence, but the ringtone seemed like a message. Cutting through the ceremony with a pointed kick, Helena didn't blink. And I understood that the phone wasn't a mistake. It was a trigger. Michelle looked at me, searching my face for an explanation I didn't have. And I continued. The ringing stopped, and a man in a grey suit stood up slowly, like someone confessing without saying anything, and walked to the side corridor. Alice was already on her feet, discreet, following the wrong choreography with her eyes. I reached the chorus and felt that some people were singing softly, as if the lyrics could shield the scene. The generator coughed again, and a shadow crossed Helena's face, exactly when a cloud covered the sun, a synchronicity that gave me goosebumps. Donna Carmen squeezed her rosary. Raphael asked for calm with his palm facing down, and I redid the introduction to Buy Time, without it seeming like a retreat. That's when a hand landed on my shoulder from behind, light and cold. And a voice whispered, "Change now." It wasn't Michelle. It wasn't Alice. It wasn't anyone I recognized. And the chill went up my spine, as if I had remembered a forgotten trauma. I changed the song to a short instrumental, obeying the voice I didn't know. And at the same time, a white napkin fell from the second floor. It looked like a wave. It looked like a plea for help. It looked like the kind of thing you invent later. But I swear I saw it. Helena lowered her eyes for the first time and breathed like someone ripping off an adhesive bandage, slowly, so it hurts more. Raphael gestured to the judge, like someone returning to the script. And the judge came, a little unsteady, maybe because of an extra glass of wine, maybe out of fear. Michelle took a step closer to me, and I saw in her eyes the question that haunted me for the rest of the day. "What are you hiding?" Alice disappeared from my field of vision, which is never a good sign. The instrumental ended, and I knew that any choice from then on would be a tug that rips more than it mends. I went back to Amapola. On the first phrase of the melody, a click echoed from the side corridor. Metal against metal. And the silence that followed was not respect. It was calculation. People shifted in their chairs, as if that would protect them. And I learned that we do small rituals to pretend we have control. Helena raised her face and stared at the corridor door, like someone waiting for someone to come back or disappear for good. Raphael took 2 steps in that direction and stopped, divided between not caring and not losing control. I played louder, so the sound would occupy the spaces. Where fear likes to live, the child started crying and the mother apologized, as if guilt had a time to be born. The judge tried to resume his speech, but his voice failed. And I wondered if the tremor was his or mine. The man in the gray suit reappeared, now pale, and whispered in Raphael's ear, something that changed the shape of his forehead. Raphael looked at me in a way I didn't understand at the time, half accusing, half asking for help, as if the music was cement for the big crack. Michelle let out an almost inaudible Leo, and my name sounded like guilt. Dona Carmen, with a small gesture, stood up, told everyone to sit down. And I saw that power has an economy of movement. Helena took a step forward, and no one noticed but me. I was on the last measure before the chorus, and felt that changing the harmony there would be like pulling the handbrake on wet asphalt. I kept going. The wind changed. When I finished the chorus, the sound of the generator died, and the light went out for good, leaving the courtyard in a twilight that smelled of freshly lit candles. People gasped in unison, and someone laughed nervously again, as if laughter could negotiate with the dark. I continued playing without a microphone, because that was what Helena had asked for, and the guitar's wood understood the message. At that moment, a message arrived on my phone, which was vibrating inside the case. Last warning. No Amapola. No blood. I wanted to believe it was a bad joke, but the skin doesn't like rationalizations. When danger brushes by, Alice reappeared out of nowhere, gasping, and whispered in my ear that she had seen something wrong in the garage. Fake names on clipboards, cars with no license plates. I asked what she wanted me to do, and she said, "Keep playing, but be ready to run." Michele held my hand for a second, while pretending to adjust a cable, and I felt her plea for honesty, even if it hurt. Raphael came back from the corridor with his jaw clenched. Helena was very quiet, and I understood that whatever it was had already begun. The judge, without a microphone, tried to speak, and the words came out like someone looking for their own legs in the dark. That's when someone screamed from the top of the stairs, a voice I recognized without knowing where it came from. "It's fake!" The scream cut through the air and hit my chest, like a slap that wakes me up from a good dream. The music stopped in my hand, but the sound remained in the courtyard, as if the melody insisted on not accepting the end. Helena took another step, and her dress brushed the tile, as if the floor had a memory, and I realized that the day had just started over again. The lights came back on with a dry click, and everyone breathed, as if they had just emerged from underwater. The judge, a little flustered, tried to resume the text, but his voice couldn't find its footing, and I was left with the feeling that the words were already too late for what had been happening behind the scenes. Alice sent another message, saying she saw two men going up to the second floor, one of them carrying a black folder, and that Helena exchanged a quick glance with them before the ceremony began. I felt my stomach tighten, as if I had swallowed a rope with knots. The wind brought the smell of gasoline, and nobody seemed to notice. Michelle looked at me with suspicion, as if she knew that something big was about to burst. And I had no way to explain anything, because even I didn't understand. Helena asked to speak with the judge before the signing, and Raphael didn't like it. But he let her. Perhaps so as not to ruin his posture. In front of the guests, she whispered to the judge, who nodded. And I saw her hand tremble when she touched the pen. It wasn't ordinary nervousness. It was the kind of tremor of someone about to make a life-changing decision. Michelle came up to me and said she had seen one of the security guards checking his phone all the time, as if he were waiting for an order from outside. She asked me if I knew anything, and I could only shake my head, because speaking would be admitting that I had something to do with all of it. The man in the gray suit appeared again, now without the folder, and positioned himself next to the side door, like a movie bodyguard. Alice took a picture of him hidden, and I heard the click of the phone camera, louder than normal. Raphael remained impassive, but I saw sweat trickling down the back of his neck, and that said more than any words. Helena took a deep breath, smiled at the guests, and announced that she wanted to say a few words. Before signing, a heavy silence fell over the courtyard like a tarpaulin. She started by talking about her father, her absent mother, about promises made and broken, and I realized that her voice no longer trembled. Something was happening behind that speech, as if each word were a code for someone specific in the audience. Michelle squeezed my hand and said very quietly, "Something is wrong." And I knew it. I just didn't know the extent of it. Alice, who always sniffs out danger before anyone else, stood up and got closer to the stairs, phone in hand, like someone holding a weak but ready weapon. Suddenly, Helena said she couldn't sign anything without telling a truth, and Raphael stepped forward, trying to interrupt, but she raised her hand and asked to finish. That's when I heard a metallic noise, coming from the second floor, like a lid rattling, and the man in the gray suit put his hand inside his jacket. Michelle saw it too and held my arm tightly, as if I could prevent what was about to happen. The judge backed away. The guests started to murmur, and the wind brought the smell of gasoline more strongly. Helena took a deep breath and said the wedding couldn't continue that way. Raphael tried to smile, but looked more like a cornered animal than an elegant groom. Alice was filming everything now, her phone trembling in her hand, and I played a short chord just to fill the silence that was becoming unbearable. It was at that moment that someone shouted, "Fire!" Coming from the side corridor. The word crossed the courtyard and exploded inside every guest, like an echoing grenade. People started to get up from their chairs, some running, others standing still, as if their bodies didn't know where to go. I saw smoke coming from the second floor, Then still, but growing. The man in the gray suit said something in Raphael's ear, who suddenly turned pale. And Helena just closed her eyes for an instant, like someone who already knew this was going to happen. Michelle tried to pull Alice away, but she kept filming, stubborn as ever, wanting to record every detail, even with the danger growing around us. The judge dropped the papers on the floor, and the wind scattered the pages across the courtyard, as if fate itself had decided that nothing there would remain in order. Raphael shouted for the security guards to close the gates, and that made everyone even more nervous, because it felt like we were trapped. Helena went down 2 steps and picked up the microphone that no longer worked. Then she screamed without it. The truth needs to come out today. And then the chaos truly began. One of the guests fainted near the cake table. Children were crying, and someone said they had seen a man with a gun in the corridor. Michelle pulled me by the arm, but I couldn't leave there, because everything revolved around that song, that promise, and the feeling that I was in the middle of something much bigger than a simple interrupted wedding. Alice ran outside to try to get a cell phone signal, and I lost sight of her. In the middle of the smoke that was now getting thicker, Helena threw her bouquet on the ground. Raphael tried to grab her arm, but she broke free and screamed for everyone to hear that she wasn't going to sign anything. Donna Carmen appeared with the rosary in her hand, telling everyone to calm down. But it seemed like no one was listening anymore. The man in the gray suit started to walk toward the stairs, and I saw the glint of something metallic in his hand. Michelle screamed for me to get out of there, but my feet wouldn't obey. The smoke swallowed half the courtyard, and the smell of gasoline became unbearable. And then someone I didn't see clearly shouted from the second floor, "Close the doors! Nobody gets out." The doors slammed shut with a bang that silenced any attempt to remain calm, and the entire courtyard seemed to shrink. All of a sudden, the heat of the smoke, mixed with the panic, made the air heavy, and some people started to cough. Helena looked at it all without crying, without trembling, like someone who finally sees the truth turning into a storm after years kept in a cloud. Raphael tried to shout orders, but no one obeyed anymore, and that seemed to corrode the control he so liked to have. Michelle was holding my arm tightly, asking us to get out of there, but I was paralyzed, trapped in the middle of that scene that seemed written to end badly. Alice reappeared from the left side, filming, and screamed that there was someone with gasoline cans on the second floor. No one believed it at first, until the smoke turned black and the first flames appeared in the window. The guests started pushing the chairs, trying to open the doors, but the security guards kept them closed, saying it was for everyone's safety. That made no sense at all. If there was fire, why hold everyone inside? Helena went up 3 steps and screamed for them to open the doors, but the men ignored her. Raphael tried to approach her, and she yelled for him not to touch her, her voice breaking for the first time. But not from fear, from rage. Michelle pulled me back, saying it was going to be a serious problem. And I could only think of the man in the grey suit, now too close to the stairs, and with his hand inside his jacket again. Suddenly, someone threw a chair against one of the side doors, and the glass shattered with a loud crack, opening an improvised route. People started to leave through there, pushing and running, and the security guards tried to stop them. But they couldn't hold back the desperate crowd. Raphael shouted for them to stay calm, but no one was listening anymore. Elena picked up the broken microphone, just to hit the stand with it, trying to get attention, and said something that froze the entire courtyard. If anyone leaves here now, they'll kill them. People stopped for a second, not understanding if it was a metaphor or a literal threat. Alice ran to me and said she had heard the security guards talking about not letting any press leave. That's when everything made sense. All of a sudden, the smoke, the blocking of the doors, Helena's desperation. It wasn't just an interrupted wedding. Something much bigger was happening, and we were trapped inside. Michelle pulled my arm with more force, saying we needed to get out before it was too late. Helena looked at me and yelled, "Keep playing!" And it made no sense at all in the middle of the chaos, but I obeyed. My fingers found the chords on the guitar, and the music seemed to stitch the confusion with crooked lines. The fire advanced on the second floor, cracking old wood, and the sound seemed to blend with that of the guitar strings, as if the entire mansion were an out-of-tune instrument, about to break. Raphael argued with the man in the grey suit. Gestures were abrupt. Words I didn't understand. And Helena stared at the two of them, like someone looking at a sentence before it's read. Michelle tried to lead Alice outside, through the broken window. But Alice wanted to keep filming, saying that this was going to be on television. I didn't know whether to laugh at her courage or cry at the real danger we were living through. Suddenly, I heard a gunshot. A single dry shot that silenced everyone. There was no way to know where it came from the second floor corridor, or from inside our own heads. From so much accumulated fear, Helena didn't move. Raphael didn't either. The man in the grey suit put something back in his jacket and started to descend the stairs slowly, like someone finishing a job and not being in a hurry to leave the stage. Michelle pushed me to the side, shouting for us to go out the window, and I was still holding the guitar, as if the music could protect someone there. The judge disappeared in the middle of the confusion, all the papers burning near the cake table, and the fire gaining strength too quickly. Alice managed to get out through the side, filming until the last second, and Michelle finally pulled me with her. But I was looking back the whole time, looking for Helena. She was standing in the middle of the courtyard, alone, while Raphael yelled for someone to bring the car, and the man in the grey suit simply walked out the back door without looking at anyone. People were pushing, coughing, screaming. But it seemed like the entire mansion revolved around that woman in a white dress, standing in the middle of the smoke. Helena looked at me one last time and yelled something I couldn't hear well because of the noise, but it sounded like my name. After that, a part of the ceiling collapsed, and everyone ran for the makeshift exits. I managed to get out the window with Michelle and Alice, but the last image I had was of Raphael pulling Helena by the arm, the smoke swallowing both of them, and the sound of the guitar falling to the floor behind me. Outside, the street was full of people. Sirens in the distance, and no one knew how to say who had fired the shot, who was alive, or what was going to happen next. I stood on the curb, my chest burning with smoke and questions, and looked at the mansion on fire, like someone watching a story being torn from their hands, with no chance to rewrite it. Michelle was crying next to me. Alice was showing the video to the arriving police, and I couldn't feel anything but a huge emptiness in my stomach. There was no wedding, no music, no answers. Just sirens, smoke, and the certainty that that day wasn't over, even with the sun setting behind the buildings. People were talking at the same time, each with a different version of what they had seen. Some said it was an accident. Others spoke of an attack. And some swore that it all had to do with Raphael's business. Michelle held my hand without saying anything, and Alice insisted that the video showed clearly the man in the grey suit shooting upwards before the ceiling fell. The police asked for calm, but no one wanted to calm down. The mansion was creaking, as if complaining about centuries of history, burning all at once. And I didn't even know where to begin to understand it all. Suddenly, someone asked if they had found Helena. No one answered. Raphael appeared out of nowhere, his clothes covered in soot, but without her. He said something about the confusion, but no one paid much attention, because the question about Helena had been left suspended in the air like a weight impossible to ignore. Michelle looked at me, and I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. This wasn't over. The smoke was rising. The sirens were getting louder, and night fell too quickly. covering everything like a turned page. Before the story ended, I stayed there until there was nothing left to see, the mansion turning to ash, people slowly leaving, and the question about Helena unanswered. The last thing I saw before I left was someone saying that the doors had been locked from the inside, not by the fire, not by the guests, but by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And then I understood that the day had ended, but the story had only just begun. The doors slammed with a bang that silenced any attempt to remain calm, and the entire courtyard seemed to shrink. All of a sudden, the heat of the smoke, mixed with the panic, made the air heavy, and some people started to cough. Helena looked at it all without crying, without trembling, like someone who finally sees the truth turning into a storm. After years kept in a cloud, Raphael tried to shout orders, but no one obeyed anymore. And that seemed to corrode the control he so liked to have. Michelle was holding my arm tightly, asking us to get out of there. But I was paralyzed, trapped in the middle of that scene that seemed written to end badly. Alice reappeared from the left side, filming, and screamed that there was someone with gasoline cans on the second floor. No one believed it at first, until the smoke turned black and the first flames appeared in the window. The guests started pushing the chairs, trying to open the doors, but the security guards kept them closed, saying it was for everyone's safety. That made no sense at all. If there was fire, why hold everyone inside? Helena went up 3 steps and screamed for them to open the doors, but the men ignored her. Raphael tried to approach her, and she yelled for him not to touch her, her voice breaking for the first time. But not from fear, from rage. Michelle pulled me back, saying it was going to be a serious problem, and I could only think of the man in the grey suit, now too close to the stairs, and with his hand inside his jacket again. Suddenly, someone threw a chair against one of the side doors, and the glass shattered with a loud crack, opening an improvised route. People started to leave through there, pushing and running, and the security guards tried to stop them. But they couldn't hold back the desperate crowd. Raphael shouted for them to stay calm, but no one was listening anymore. Helena picked up the broken microphone, just to hit the stand with it, trying to get attention, and said something that froze the entire courtyard. If anyone leaves here now, they'll kill them. People stopped for a second, not understanding if it was a metaphor or a literal threat. Alice ran to me and said she had heard security guards talking about not letting any press leave. That's when everything made sense, all of a sudden, the smoke, the blocking of the doors, Helena's desperation. It wasn't just an interrupted wedding. Something much bigger was happening, and we were trapped inside. Michelle pulled my arm with more force, saying we needed to get out before it was too late. Helena looked at me and yelled, "Keep playing." And it made no sense at all in the middle of the chaos. But I obeyed. My fingers found the chords on the guitar, and the music seemed to stitch the confusion with crooked lines. The fire advanced on the second floor, cracking old wood, and the sound seemed to blend with that of the guitar strings, as if the entire mansion were an out-of-tune instrument. About to break, Raphael argued with the man in the gray suit. Gestures were abrupt. Words I didn't understand. And Helena stared at the two of them like someone looking at a sentence before it's read. Michelle tried to lead Alice outside, through the broken window. But Alice wanted to keep filming, saying that this was going to be on television. I didn't know whether to laugh at her courage or cry at the real danger we were living through. Suddenly, I heard a gunshot. A single dry shot that silenced everyone. There was no way to know where it came from the second floor corridor, or from inside our own heads. From so much accumulated fear, Helena didn't move. Raphael didn't either. The man in the gray suit put something back in his jacket and started to descend the stairs slowly, like someone finishing a job and not being in a hurry to leave the stage. Michelle pushed me to the side, shouting for us to go out the window, and I was still holding the guitar, as if the music could protect someone. There, the judge disappeared in the middle of the confusion, all the papers burning near the cake table, and the fire gaining strength too quickly. Alice managed to get out through the side, filming until the last second, and Michelle finally pulled me with her. But I was looking back the whole time, looking for Helena. She was standing in the middle of the courtyard, alone, while Raphael yelled for someone to bring the car, and the man in the gray suit simply walked out the back door without looking at anyone. People were pushing, coughing, screaming. But it seemed like the entire mansion revolved around that woman in a white dress, standing in the middle of the smoke. Helena looked at me one last time and yelled something I couldn't hear well because of the noise. But it sounded like my name. After that, a part of the ceiling collapsed, and everyone ran for the makeshift exits. I managed to get out the window with Michelle and Alice, but the last image I had was of Raphael, pulling Helena by the arm the smoke swallowing both of them, and the sound of the guitar falling to the floor behind me. Outside, the street was full of people. Sirens in the distance, and no one knew who had fired the shot, who was alive, or what was going to happen next. I stood on the curb, my chest burning with smoke and questions, and looked at the mansion, on fire, like someone watching a story, being torn from their hands, with no chance to rewrite it. Michelle was crying next to me. Alice was showing the video to the arriving police, and I couldn't feel anything but a huge emptiness in my stomach. There was no wedding, no music, no answers. Just sirens, smoke, and the certainty that that day wasn't over, even with the sun setting behind the buildings. People were talking at the same time, each with a different version of what they had seen. Some said it was an accident. Others spoke of an attack. And some swore that it all had to do with Raphael's business. Michelle held my hand without saying anything, and Alice insisted that the video showed clearly the man in the grey suit shooting upwards before the ceiling fell. The police asked for calm, but no one wanted to calm down. The mansion was creaking as if it were complaining about centuries of history, burning all at once. And I didn't even know where to begin to understand it all. Suddenly, someone asked if they had found Helena. No one answered. Raphael appeared out of nowhere, his clothes covered in soot. But without her, he said something about the confusion, but no one paid much attention, because the question about Helena had been left suspended in the air, like a weight impossible to ignore. Michelle looked at me, and I knew that she was thinking the same thing I was. This wasn't over. The smoke was rising. The sirens were getting louder, and night fell too quickly, covering everything like a turned page. Before the story ended, I stayed there until there was nothing left to see. The mansion turning to ash, people slowly leaving, and the question about Helena unanswered. The last thing I saw before I left was someone saying that the doors had been locked from the inside, not by the fire, not by the guests, but by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And then I understood that the day had ended, but the story had only just begun. When night finally fell, the mansion was still burning, and people started to disperse. But the question about Helena remained stuck in the air like smoke that doesn't know where to go. Raphael was talking to the police, but I could tell that he wasn't worried about his missing wife. Or maybe he was. but in a way that didn't seem like love. It was more like someone who had lost an important document. In the middle of a gust of wind, Michelle was pulling me by the arm, saying we needed to go home. But I didn't want to yet. I felt that if I left, everything would be left unexplained, and I wouldn't be able to sleep ever again. Alice insisted on showing the videos to the press that was starting to arrive. But the police told her to delete everything, saying it was not to interfere with the investigation. She didn't delete them, of course. She just hid the phone in her pocket and said no one could control her memory. The man in the gray suit had disappeared. And for me, that was worse than the smoke. The fire and the gunshot combined. Because disappearing like that, without a trace, meant that he had a planned exit. It meant that someone knew very well what they were doing. Raphael was shouting at one of the firefighters, saying he needed to go in to get important papers. And that angered me, because no one was even sure if Helena was alive or not. And he was talking about documents as if she was just a detail, burned along with the curtains. Michelle said in my ear that she was sure Raphael knew about everything beforehand, and I didn't know how to respond. Maybe he did know. Maybe it was all his, even the fire. Alice came back running. After talking to one of the neighbors, and said they had seen a black car leave from the back right after the shot, and that someone said they had seen a woman in a white dress inside. I froze. Helena. If it was true, then she wasn't in the mansion when the ceiling fell. But who took her? Why? Michelle said the police wouldn't do anything immediately, because to them, it seemed like just another tragedy involving rich people. And a rich person's tragedy always has secrets that take time to surface. I knew she was right. But that left me even more restless. Raphael finally came to talk to me, and it was as if an actor had left the stage to talk to the audience. He told me not to comment on anything about the messages I received on my phone, and that caught me off guard, because I hadn't told anyone about them, besides Alice. How did he know? I asked him that, but he just smiled, a smile that had no joy in it, and said that some things are better left forgotten. Michelle stood to the side, listening to everything, and then asked me what he meant by that. I didn't answer, because I didn't even know where to begin. Helena was still missing. The fire was almost under control, and some guests gave statements to the police, each with a different version. Some spoke of an accident, others of an attack. and some said it was just a family fight that ended badly. Alice wanted to convince the reporters to stay because, according to her, the story wasn't over yet. But the police pushed everyone out, saying it was now an isolated area. Raphael kept arguing with them, saying he had rights. And I saw in his face that all of this wasn't grief. It was something else. Fear, maybe. Rage. Or guilt. When we finally managed to get out of the isolated area, Michelle wanted to go home. But Alice said we needed to look for Helena. I didn't even know where to begin. The black car the neighbors saw could be anywhere now. The police didn't seem to be in any hurry. And Raphael disappeared in the middle of the confusion, probably to deal with his important documents. I felt that everyone was acting in different roles, and I was the only one who hadn't received my script yet. Michelle argued with me on the way, saying that I was getting too involved, that it wasn't our problem. But I knew it was. Because someone sent messages to me before everything happened. Because Helena looked at me in a way that seemed like a cry for help. We stopped at a diner that was open all night, and Alice turned on her laptop to try to enlarge the images she had recorded. She's good with those things. She managed to zoom in on the moment when the man in the gray suit shoots upwards and then says something to Raphael. Michelle looked at the screen with a strange expression, as if she were putting together pieces that we didn't have yet. I couldn't stop thinking about the black car. If Helena was inside, then someone shot before the fire got worse. But why? To save her, or to kidnap her? Alice found a frame where you could see part of the car's license plate, and that made everyone's heart race. Michelle suggested taking it to the police, but Alice laughed and said they wouldn't do anything tonight, that it was better if we tried to find something out ourselves first. I didn't know if it was courage or madness, but I agreed. I called an acquaintance who works with a ride-sharing app and asked if he could track the car by the partial plate. He said he'd try, but that it would be difficult late at night. Meanwhile, Raphael gave an interview to a local TV station, and what he said left me with more questions than answers. Helena is fine. She's in a safe place. Trust me. But he didn't explain where or with whom. Michelle thought Raphael was lying. Alice did too. I just knew he didn't seem worried. In the right way. He wasn't a desperate husband looking for his wife. He was someone trying to control the narrative. The diner was almost empty, and the television showed the mansion on fire again and again, as if the day hadn't ended. I looked at it and felt that we were inside a story that wasn't going to end well. Michelle held my hand under the table and said that if we went after this, there would be no turning back. And she was right. But I already knew I wouldn't be able to stop. My friend with the app called back half an hour later with a lead. He said a car with those letters on the plate had been seen entering a rural road out of the city. He wasn't sure, but it seemed to be the same model. Alice opened a map on the laptop and marked the spot. Michelle said it was crazy to go after it, but Alice was already putting things in her backpack. I looked at Michelle, at the map, at the television, showing the mansion burning, and understood that the story wouldn't let me sleep if I didn't see it through to the end. She saw it on my face and just said, "Then let's go together. But if it goes wrong, it's your fault." We left the city after midnight, following the coordinates that my friend with the app gave me. Michelle drove in silence, her face set like someone who knows they are entering a story that doesn't usually end well. Alice talked non-stop, speculating theories, saying that maybe Helena had run away on her own will. Maybe she had been kidnapped. Maybe she knew something about Raphael and his company. I didn't say anything, just looked out the window at the dark road passing by quickly, the trees making shadows like long hands trying to grab us. The radio talked about politics and the mansion fire, but no one commented on the missing woman, about the gunshot, about the man in the gray suit. It was as if certain parts of the story had been deliberately erased. On the way, Alice showed another frame of the video where you could see Helena looking at the black car before it took off. It was fast, almost imperceptible, but it seemed like she got in alone. Michelle asked if it couldn't be a mistake, but Alice insisted that her expression wasn't one of fear. It was something else. I looked again and had the same impression. Helena seemed determined, like someone who had been waiting for that. And that made everything even more confusing, because if she got in on her own will, then where was she going? And why leave everyone thinking she had died in the fire? We arrived at a dirt road. After 40 minutes, of driving. My friend with the app said that the toll booth cameras had recorded the car going in that direction, but after that, there was nothing. Michele slowed down. The headlights, illuminating the dust and some abandoned sheds that looked like a bad detective movie set. Alice was filming everything with her phone, insisting that this was still going to be a news story. And I started to feel that we were crossing a line. There was something about that night that felt too wrong. Like when the air gets heavy before a storm. We stopped near a closed gas station because the road continued into a thicket, and it became difficult to know where the car could have gone. Alice got out to ask a resident who was smoking on the porch of a simple house, and the man said he had seen a black car pass by quickly earlier, but he couldn't say where it went. Michele wanted to go back, saying that this was a job for the police, but Alice insisted that the police wouldn't do anything. Not that night. Not with rich people involved. I was stuck between the two of them, knowing that they were both right in different ways. When we were about to give up, a sound of an engine came from the dirt road. Michele turned off the headlights, and we all crouched down near the car, waiting. A black vehicle passed slowly, and Alice recorded it with her phone. But it was a different model, not the one we were looking for. Still, the man driving looked at our car like he recognized it, and that made Michele want to leave immediately. Alice said to follow, but I knew we weren't even sure who was inside. It was too dangerous. We decided to go back to the city and try to find more information in the morning. But on the way back, we stopped at a bar, open 24 hours on the side of the road, to think calmly. Michele went to the bathroom, and Alice stayed with her laptop, trying to clarify the video images, to see if she could find a whole license plate, a face. I ordered coffee, but it was cold and bitter. And maybe it was better that way, because no one was there to feel comfortable. The silence of the early morning was as heavy as lead. Suddenly, a truck driver sitting at the counter looked at the laptop screen and said he knew that car. He said he had seen it, parked near an abandoned farm, about 10 kilometers from there, that sometimes there was movement at night. Alice asked what kind of movement, and the man shrugged, just saying that it was strange people, too well dressed for that place. Michele came back from the bathroom right then and heard everything, saying that this was the last straw for us to get out of there. But Alice looked at me with that look of someone who had already decided they were going to see it through to the end. I knew that going to that farm was stupid, but something told me that Helena was there, Maybe it was just the desire to have answers. Maybe it was because that night seemed to be pushing us towards disaster, as if it had a script of its own. Michele threatened to leave by herself if we continued. But in the end, she got back in the car, cursing softly, because she knew she wouldn't convince me to give up. Alice was putting the coordinates into the GPS, and I felt we were entering a point of no return. The road to the farm was even worse, bumpy and unlit. The car rattled, and Michelle complained the whole time, saying that this was suicide, that no one would ever hear from us again if it went wrong. Alice filmed everything, because for her, each risk was another chapter of the story she wanted to tell.
Later.
I just wanted to understand what Helena was doing, why she got in that car, why she seemed so calm in the middle of the chaos, and why Raphael said on TV that she was fine, without explaining anything. When we finally arrived, we saw the farm below, with a light on the porch. 2 cars parked outside, none of them black. Michelle said it was a sign that no one was there, but Alice thought that was exactly why. We should go and check it out. We stayed in the car for a few minutes, arguing, until the front door opened and a man came out. To smoke, no. It wasn't the one in the gray suit, but he had the same manner of a security guard, standing alert, looking around, like someone who knows they might need to shoot at any moment. We stayed motionless inside the car, the headlights off, the engine turned off, only hearing the crickets and the distant sound of the city that seemed to be on another planet. The man smoked slowly, without a hurry, like someone who knew they had time and the advantage on their side. Michele was saying that we were going crazy, that it wasn't going to end well, that we weren't police or movie heroes. Alice just held her phone firmly, recording everything, as if at least the story would survive, even if we didn't. I wondered if Helena was inside, if she had entered that house by choice, or by force. And the silence seemed to scream the answers that no one was giving. After a few minutes, another man appeared at the door, said something to the one who was smoking, and pointed towards the surrounding thicket. They seemed to be suspicious of something, but they didn't look at our car. Michelle was squeezing my hand, like someone holding an anchor in a storm, and Alice wasn't taking the phone off recording, even with the battery dying. Suddenly, the farm door opened again and a woman came out, in a light-colored dress. My heart beat so fast I could feel it in my teeth. But when she approached the light, we saw that it wasn't Helena, It was another older woman, perhaps a resident there. She was also smoking, talking softly with the men, and that only increased the strangeness. Because who smokes with bodyguards at midnight, in a forgotten place like this? Alice wanted to get out of the car and try to film from closer. But Michelle held her by the arm and said that if anyone saw us, it would all end there. I knew she was right. But the curiosity was a beast impossible to tame at that moment. Until a noise came from inside the house. A metallic sound, heavy like a chain being dragged. The men looked back, and I saw a quick sign of concern on their faces, the kind you can't hide, even with practice. Michelle whispered that it was all too wrong, and I didn't disagree. A few minutes later, a car stopped in front of the farm. Black, the same model. The men went to the gate, opened it, and the car drove in slowly, as if expected. Alice was recording everything, trembling with anxiety, and I couldn't breathe properly. Michelle said to leave before it was too late, but my legs wouldn't obey. The car door opened and someone got out.